Greetings friends, welcome to my channel. I am Alexander Musienko. Today is May 8th, Thursday, Ankuda, and this is the first so-called day of the so-called ceasefire announced by the Russian dictator Putin. And now we will specifically analyze whether this ceasefire is being adhered to or implemented, and what is happening. So as of now, at this moment when I am recording this video for you, on the morning of May 8th, no enemy UAVs or missile launches have been detected in the skies over Ukraine. I mean, long-range UAVs, drones like the Shahed and so on. We are not talking about FPV Mavics and so on. Currently, information about this is still coming from the front, although there are preliminary data indicating that in certain areas it has become quieter, with less intense enemy fire and offensive actions. Again, I emphasize, this is as of 7 in the morning. On the 8th, even as of 6:30, as of May 8th this year. Let's see how it goes further. Again, regarding the sky over Russia, in some regions, for example, in the Lipetsk region, the governor and local authorities have reported that the level of danger from air threats due to airstrikes has been changed from red to yellow. That is, they also do not see any launches, but the day before it was just simple. Because the day before, well, I don't know what data the Russian Ministry of Defense was presenting, but they noted that supposedly over 500 drones were launched at Russian territory from Ukraine, about 5 out of 540 UAVs. Imagine that. They were suffering because airports in Moscow were not operating, because people were sleeping on the floor, because there were program failures, because flights were delayed or cancelled. Well, let them experience all the so-called joys of war themselves. They shouldn't have started the aggression against Ukraine. They shouldn't have started this war, because it's well known for a long time, a banal thing, but a truth that holds: you sow the wind, you reap the whirlwind. And the fact that Russia comes, the fact that Russia came to the territory of Ukraine and thought that it would go unpunished for them? No. They are dealing not with a nation of slaves now, or peasants, or serfs as they thought, but with free citizens, innovative, creative, successful, who have the will to resist and to fight, and who are also working on finding technical solutions, improving long-range drones, and ensuring that the Russians feel that none of their attacks will go unanswered. There will be a reaction to everything. There will be revenge for everything. So let these aggressors feel what war really is. I think you all agree with me. Therefore, the Russians claimed that over 500 UAVs, and they also talked about the so-called Long Neptune, about the fact that a Ukrainian-made missile also attacked Russian territory. They mentioned attacks by Atak-Mesete and guided aerial bombs JDAM. Well, let them feel it, let them see our capabilities. And all this was happening while Vučić, the president of Serbia, was trying to make his way to Russia for the parade. Well, you see, none of the Baltic countries agreed to let his plane pass. That's how it is. Well, by some means or other, with some truths and untruths, like they used to say about commuter trains, he somehow managed to get there. But the president of Azerbaijan, Aliyev, cancelled his visit to Russia, to Moscow for the parade. And we are, of course, grateful to him for that. He made the right choice, although it was wrong from the start to agree to it, but ultimately right, in the sense that he refused. Therefore, such a decision can only be applauded. This is important. Meanwhile, returning somewhat to the attacks that took place, the attacks were large-scale across Russia. They involved the airfield in the Moscow region, where Su-27 aircraft are based. These attacks also concerned Saransk. They targeted objects, such as a military factory specializing in fiber-optic systems, which are used by Russian drones on fiber optics, posing a current problem at the front, presenting risks, challenges, and threats. Strikes were carried out on them. In addition, strikes were carried out on other military-industrial complex facilities within Russia. Indeed, the attack is quite extensive, it is powerful, and as we can see, effective. I think that soon we will also receive official detailed information about what happened, how it was attacked, and possible losses, which are undoubtedly being collected now, and we will see the complete picture. But judging by everything, it is indeed a combined missile drone attack by Ukraine on Russian territory. Well, ultimately, I think that soon we will also see Ukrainian ballistics in action. As promised by the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, who pays significant attention to this, discussing these issues quite often during the meetings of the Supreme Commander-in-Chief's headquarters. It is kept under control, of course, to ensure that the projects of the Ukrainian defense industry complex, particularly the production of ballistic missiles, continue to develop, because this is extremely important for us, and we understand this. In the meantime, the President of the United States, well, let's proceed chronologically. The Vice President of the United States of America, although, sorry, I forgot to tell you about Oreshnik. I was wondering whether to talk about it or not. Well, you probably heard that in Russia, Russian propaganda has started hysterically shouting that if Ukraine takes measures to disrupt the parade in Moscow on May 9th, they might use Oreshnik again. It hasn't been used since November, December of last year. They didn't talk about it in Russia, because before this, Putin quite often, would that, whether necessary or not, mentioned this Oreshnik, intimidated, and talked about it. And now again, they are playing the same record, starting to say that, we will hit if necessary. So, conversations of this nature are beginning, but it is absolutely clear that this is once again intimidation, blackmail, pressure, an attempt to sow panic and demoralization. But I am confident that these calculations will not work. And I think, friends, please write to me in the comments what you think about this, and whether you are afraid of these Russian Putin threats regarding the use of Oreshniks or other next to Wunderwaffes. Your point of view and opinion will be interesting here. In the meantime, the Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance, stated that it is very difficult to achieve peace right now because Russia is asking for too much. And because of this, achieving peace is elusive and impossible at this moment. In other words, it is acknowledged that indeed Putin's demands cannot be met. And I can congratulate all of us because Ukraine has not broken down. The President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, has taken a strong principled position to protect our national interests. The Ukrainian defense forces were inflicting significant losses on the enemy during this time. There were drone strikes on Russia, meaning the fight did not stop for a day, or even a minute. And ultimately, we see that Ukraine is demonstrating that, stop, you will not break us. There is no need to drag us into any concessions akin to capitulation. Sorry, let's call things by their names. Especially unilateral concessions. No, there are our conditions. There are red lines that we will not cross. And they are clearly declared and voiced. And there is nothing to offer us here right now. And you see, this patience, this will to fight, this diplomacy of ours, it ultimately works. And it has such consequences as J.D. Vance talks about. Well, the President of the United States of America, Donald Trump, in turn, confirmed this at a briefing and said that perhaps J.D. Vance is right. But at the same time, Trump mentioned that it is necessary to approach and start talking about or ending the Russian-Ukrainian war. Was Ukraine against it? We have never been against it. I want to remind you, but the question is how to end it. And we have clearly emphasized and will continue to emphasize that it needs to be ended on terms that are favorable for Ukraine. That is, from a position of strength, we cannot agree to demands regarding the surrender of territories, demilitarization, and the like. None of this. Similar things can happen. This is what needs to be understood. Well, the U.S. Special Representative for Ukraine, General Keith Kellogg, stated that the only obstacle to achieving peace today is Russia and Putin. Thank you. Absolutely clear and understandable. And, well, this is a statement of facts. But I think we obviously agree and see that this is indeed the case. At the same time, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, for the first time, effectively a representative of this U.S. administration, called Putin a war criminal. That is indeed, this is a precedent. They hadn't spoken like this before. And one can say that more, well, in this way, it's important to record this. At the same time, Bessent did not rule out that, of course, some dialogue with Russia can and should be conducted. But still, Putin is a war criminal. Well, that's how they actually define it. That has been a change in the course of the United States of America, clearly. And Ukraine, the Ukrainian people, the Ukrainian government, the president of Ukraine, who made significant efforts, have achieved that we, are not put in a position and are not told, you are nobody, you will now do what we tell you. Nothing of the sort. This is what is important today. Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, stated that Ukraine is ready for a ceasefire, but again, for a period of 30 days. And we are waiting for similar steps from Russia, because only this can demonstrate the willingness of how ready or not ready Russia is to stop the fire. And here one can only agree. And the French President Emmanuel Macron supported this and stated that France is working towards achieving a ceasefire, specifically for 30 days. He did not detail or specify the exact tools being used, but he made this statement. And this is really good. The whole world must apply pressure. But here's an interesting fact. The fact that the President of the United States, Donald Trump, called the President of Turkey, Erdogan, with the aim of discussing the issue of the Russian-Ukrainian war, the establishment of a ceasefire and peace. This may also indicate that the American president is currently unsure if he has all the power in the paradigm he is in. After all, it must be understood that it is about providing more weapons, conducting a more decisive policy, and ultimately applying more severe sanctions. Those 500% of Lindsey Graham, the United States Senator, who wants to push through the appropriate severe sanctions via Congress, which will then be very difficult to lift. So, evidently, the US president still wants diplomacy to somehow have an impact. And on this path, to involve Turkish President Erdogan, who, I want to remind you, has already been involved in the issues of the Russian-Ukrainian war. We all remember the year 2022, the start of the full-scale Russian invasion, and the negotiations in Turkey between the Russian and Ukrainian delegations that took place and were discussed there. And supposedly with a draft or project of some agreements, Putin then tried to flaunt it on camera and blackmail someone saying, look, they supposedly agreed. Well, in reality, it was an informational propaganda action by the Russian dictator aimed at trying, of course, to sow some discord, despair, panic, and the like. But again, the American president wants to involve Turkey because it's not that simple. Well, at the same time, Donald Trump officially declared May 8th as Victory Day and stated that the United States, specifically the United States of America, defeated Nazi Germany. By the way, this cult of victors is a debatable issue. I saw that many people here mocked this idea, even condemned it. But I can tell you that, in principle, ultimately, we also need to understand that there is a day of remembrance and reconciliation, and there is also a victory day. And no matter what, yes, difficult victories, yes, complex, yes, with great sacrifice, but we must remember this, commemorate it. And we must also cultivate a culture of victories. No matter what, this should support, rally, unite the nation and prepare it further for struggle. Meanwhile, the conclave has begun in the Vatican. There was already a first vote, but from the first time, well, it was not expected that a pontiff, the Pope, would be elected, because black smoke appeared, and the discussions and voting, I think, will continue to be intense. This vote will determine the course the Catholic Church will take, whether it will inherit, through the new Pope, the path of the previous Pope Francis, and pursue liberal reforms and concessions, or perhaps there will be a conservative rightward shift. And there is a demand for a conservative rightward shift. This is demonstrated by elections in many European countries, including, for example, the first round of voting in Romania, which showed that despite the imprisonment of George, you can see that ideology still plays a role. Therefore, it is also interesting, and I will be observing and informing about this. Well, friends, let me remind you that despite everything, with strength and God's help, primarily with God's help, we look and move only forward. We stand firm, hold the line, and move forward. Take care of yourselves, and glory to Ukraine.